I started walking around and seeing people with AI pins at business conferences, Claude, where they're recording, and Meta glasses. But we now live in a world where everyone could watch us, be recording what you're saying, even not bad motives, but they could be going back to their AI training model at the end of the day, plug it in because they don't want to forget what they've talked about. And guess what? Now it's feeding all your IP into that large language model, and you're at risk.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. Welcome back. Today, I'm joined by Kary Oberbrunner, founder of Instant IP, entrepreneur, futurist, and Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestselling author of 14 books. As CEO of Igniting Souls and creator of Instant IP, Kary helps entrepreneurs, creators, and business leaders protect, position, and monetize their intellectual property in the age of AI. His work focuses on helping organizations turn ideas into scalable business assets through publishing, branding, systems thinking, and blockchain-powered IP protection. Kary's a speaker and advisor on leadership, entrepreneurship, AI, blockchain, and innovation, and his work is featured in Entrepreneur Magazine, Forbes, CBS, Fox, Yahoo, and other major media outlets. Kary, welcome to the RevOps Champions podcast.
It's great to be here, my friend.
So, Kary, you often say, and you've actually written a book on this topic, which is every company is an IP company. We, of course, working in the franchise space, IP is built into franchising because that's really where so much value in franchising comes from. But let's just talk more generally. What shifts when leaders start thinking that their company is an IP company?
It's interesting. You mentioned the book. I have it right here, of course, but it is called You Are an IP Company. Yeah. And I co-wrote it with my IP lawyer, Katie. And, she's the IP professional. I'm the IP practitioner. But I'll tell you why we titled it the way we did. It's supposed to interrupt people's identity. It's supposed to be a little controversial because you might have that book hit an HVAC company and they say, no, we're not an IP company. We're an HVAC company. Or we're not a IP company. We're a coaching. We sell smoothies. Like, we want it to be a little bit disruptive because the problem is that if you don't take your IP seriously, people won't take you seriously. And I do teach entrepreneurship also at the university level, and we talk about differentiation. So if somebody doesn't think, oh, I'm not an IP company, I just install furnaces. Okay, that's why you are a commodity. That's why you're replaceable. With that type of mindset, you've just said, we're not different than anybody else. But here's the cool thing, Brendon. As I sit down with the furnace company, as I sit down with the HVAC company, the smoothie company, I start drawing out of them, let's talk about your menu. Let's talk about the names of your smoothie. Let's talk about your pricing. Let's talk about your loyalty program, your processes, your systems. You mentioned franchise, even the speedy service system, McDonald's, they were able to license that as IP. And you might say, there's just a burger joint. What are you talking about? No, they actually created an IP system that's very valuable. So it's not that people don't have IP. It's that they don't realize they have IP.
Yeah. No, I went through that same process mentally. When I read the book and when I've heard you speak, when you start to, and you in one of the keynotes that you did, you kind of took us through this process of identifying where you most likely have IP. And I could see, I was in a room with maybe, 150 people, and everyone was going, like, just making notes of all their IP, which they hadn't really thought about before, which is, I can recommend anyone to go through that process. And I think starting with your book is a really good place to start.
And we've created free tools too at instantip.today. It's called the IP Toolbox. You just scroll down and you hit Find My IP. If anybody pops in their URL and their About section from their website, 60 seconds later, it will literally say, here's all the IP that we think you have. Here's the white space that you could develop. And here's the at risk that other AI scraping your website can probably protect and lock you out of your own ideas. And Brendon, that's really why I'm passionate about this, because that is, most of the time I meet generous people. We hang out in Strategic Coach, a lot of amazing people. The problem though, is a lot of these people think, I don't care if my competitor steals from me. That's fine. I know they're going to do it anyway. I hear that all the time. And what we're seeing now, I could give you examples in the fireplace industry. I could give you examples with musicians. If you don't protect your IP, it's almost like a house. Your IP is a house. And if you leave the front door open, people can easily come up to your house, and there's this squatting rule, right? Where they can take over your house and kick you out of your own house and lock you
Mhm.
out. And we've
Mhm.
seen this happen where if you don't take your IP seriously and lock it, protect it through, I'm sure we'll get into that today. You can do traditional patents, copyrights, trademarks, or you can do instant IP, which is a smart contract. It reduces the time that it takes. It reduces the cost. But just by putting that fence around your house, it
Mhm.
prevents theft. People say, you know what? I this person, they put a fence around their house. They have a guard dog. They have a ring camera. They have a security camera. I'm not gonna infringe. And that's what
Mhm.
you want. You don't want to take people to court. You want people to respect your boundary.
Mm. Yeah, and I know I've heard a lot of people, again, when you're on the stage and people sitting around me and or maybe even in a smaller conversation where they're like, oh, I don't care if people steal my ideas because I have an abundant mindset and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. And then you only have to ask one or two questions, and they very quickly change how they were thinking. So maybe let's go there because and I know you've heard this 1,000 times when people go, oh, but I don't really care if people use my proprietary
Yeah.
technology that I built my entire business on because, if more people benefit from it, then that makes me happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you
So
respond to that?
I respond to that. You know what? Let me see your car keys. Let me see your credit cards. Great. Let me just take your physical property, and I'm sure you don't care either. The problem is, Brendan, that we have this thing in our brain that says if it's invisible and intangible,
Mhm.
therefore it's not valuable. And that is the biggest business mistake you could ever make, because if you look at the S&P 500, and I encourage people to do a little research, the S&P 500, the 500 most valuable brands on the planet, in 1975, out of those assets, only 17 were intangible. So this would have
Mhm.
been back, when my dad was at his prime. The things that were most valuable were land, inventory, physical equipment. And again, that was the S&P 500. You now have the internet that started to come in. And in I should say in 2020 to 2026, we flipped 90%. So 90% of the S&P 500, that means that this iPhone right now, 10% is the parts and pieces. The other 90% are in the patents, the trademark, the copyright, the branding, the
Mhm.
logo. That's the value. And it's quite shocking that we've shifted in some ways, but we've moved from the information age to the digital age. And
Mhm.
so digital assets can move extremely fast. And this is why, if people don't think, again, this is valuable, look at deep fakes. Why are deep fakes? Why do they exist? Because the person's NIL, name, image, and likeness, has value. And if we
Mhm.
can confuse consumers about the identity of someone, that has value. So,
Mhm.
I get that the person wants to be generous, but if you ask for their car keys and then drive off, they're going to care. They
Mhm.
should care 10 times more. And let me just give you an example. Our company's called Instant IP. We went, and people could Google this. I'm not allowed to say the name that I previously had because of a potential lawsuit. But
Mhm.
let me just say that we had a different name. And I went through all the right process, Brendan. I went through the USPTO. I got a trademark. They went so far to give me the trademark. And then there's this 30-day oppositional period. This is true in the USPTO, where the whole world can reach out and say, look, we're going to oppose that granted trademark. And if nobody opposes it in 30 days, you got it. Well,
Mhm.
guess what? In that 30-day period, my previous name of my company, even though I did all the right things, a company came out of the woodwork from Europe, multi-billion-dollar company, and said, look, you see that name that you got? That's on all your shirts, on all your website, on all your brochures, on all your slide decks, on your YouTube. Guess what? You're going to pay us royalties for the rest of your life, or we're going to sue you, or you can rebrand.
Mhm.
And I said, oh my gosh, I don't want to rebrand, but that's what I'm doing. That's what I have to do.
Yeah.
And estimates are that cost me around $20,000. And that's not even the brand confusion. And you were in some of those rooms where people said, wait, hold on, Instant IP, I thought your name was blah, blah, blah. And
Mhm.
so the longer you exist, the more brand value that you now have to change too. So I would say if people don't think it's a big deal, fine, have somebody file your business name in your state, block you,
Mhm.
or block you with a trademark or a patent, and suddenly you're starting to realize, you know what, I'm no longer free. And I
Right.
know that we all love the four freedoms that strategic coach talks about, and so if you don't feel free, that really starts messing with your confidence.
Yeah. But I think, what one of the important messages there for folks to take away, was like that your example of, why do deep fakes exist? And they wouldn't exist if what they were trying to fake was not
Yeah,
valuable, right?
exactly.
And
That's
I noticed, for example, when I was checking out your sort of latest LinkedIn profile, that I mean, you've even trademarked or protected your name,
my name.
and you're a very unique name.
I do.
But but the point is, someone
I
can
do.
can try and fake you,
Exactly.
fake being you, and so
Exactly.
you've protected it.
I did protect it. I thought, you know what, if I really believe in this IP stuff, I'm gonna like look at my whole business. And so I actually created my own IP holding company. This is a
Mhm.
very important strategy if you really want to take your IP to the next level. There's some tax advantages. There's also
Mhm.
some legal shielding as well. So let's say I get in a car accident, right, Brendon? You get in a car accident, somebody Googles your name and they're like, Kary owns a business, Brendon owns a business, and you know what? Let's go after him, right? I mean, this happens all the time to celebrities. And
Mhm.
again, I tell people that you don't protect your IP when you're big. You become big by protecting your IP. So what you can do is you can shield your IP in an IP holding company. It's got great tax incentives too, where you can license back the IP to your operating company. And
Mhm.
so again, makes a lot of sense legally, tax wise. But yeah, I would just tell you that even the smallest things. I know of a young lady who went to Nike and said, Nike, you know what? I've developed a bra with a pouch in it, a zipper thing, something like that. And, people can Google this story. And guess what? Nike said, oh, we're not interested. Sure enough, a couple years later, developed her exact technology. And, luckily she had done the right thing to archive the IP audit trail where she could go back and say, look, you guys stole that idea from me. And Nike had to pay her a settlement. So again,
Mhm.
the David and Goliath stories are out there, but why is Matthew McConaughey just protected himself from AI? Why did Taylor Swift do the same thing? It's because they're just at the point. They're a few steps ahead of us, but you're going to
Mhm.
start seeing this happen where a lot more people are going to start taking this seriously because AI is a great tool. AI has opened the door for many amazing things, but AI will steal from you.
Mhm.
Brendon, were you at an event? I think you might have been there. I
Mhm.
started walking around and seeing people with AI pins at business conferences, Claude, where they're recording,
Mhm. Mhm.
and meta glasses. But we now live in a world where everyone could watch us, be recording what you're saying, even not bad motives, but they could be going back to their AI training model at the end of the day,
Mhm.
plug it in, because they don't want to forget what they've talked about. And
Yep.
guess what? Now it's feeding all your IP into that large language model and you're
Mhm.
at risk.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think I mean, I think what I like about what you're saying here is, people just need to be thinking about this very differently now because AI is essentially lighting this on fire and just making it a lot more, of an issue than it was maybe a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, Murphy Campbell, banjo player, guess what? Somebody fed her voice into Suno. Suno's terms and conditions are, hey, we own your voice if you upload. Guess
Mhm.
what? They put in she's an Appalachian banjo player, wrote original songs, and she actually had to go through a lot of hoops because she was deplatformed from YouTube. The person who fed her voice in said, we're also going to copyright her songs. They hadn't been. And now she's locked out of her own family's music. Rolling Stones picked up the story. You can just Google Murphy Campbell. But this is becoming quite a thing. Athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, you name it. It's a $1 trillion plus industry of theft
Sure.
around IP.
Yeah. And what you're talking about now really is very much on the sort of the protection and security side, right? But if we sort of bring it back to, something I mentioned at the beginning, like one of the things that really excited us about getting into the franchise space was because one of the many reasons is that IP is built into the power of
Absolutely.
franchising, right? And I know in your book there were a few examples of franchise brands
Yeah.
who you've worked with.
Yeah. You can see
And
my screen?
yeah, let me see what it says here.
Got 47 ways of monetizing your IP.
Right.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So of course, the common ones that most people in the franchise space are familiar with, of course, are royalties. But then you have there's a bunch of others that anyone getting into franchising for the first time, and maybe
There it
even
is.
people, yeah, and people who've been in the franchise space for a long time might even not even realize all the different types of intellectual property that could be owned that they might not own,
Absolutely.
which again is I don't know, maybe you can explain this better, but to me that's the more sort of the more exciting part of IP, right?
Oh,
Is
yeah, the
the
offense, the money generation, yeah.
right. Yeah, so I like that. The sort of there's the defensive IP play, and then there's the offensive play. Obviously, ideally everybody's doing both, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Case in point, there's a guy named Donald Miller who wrote a book called Story Brand, and so that
Very
one
familiar.
book, he turned into a keynote, he turned into AI software, he turned into certification. Now it's, hey, become a story brand guide.
Mhm,
Okay. So now
mhm,
he's actually charging a fee to certify you and then an annual fee to renew. Working Genius, Patrick Lencioni does the same thing. You get certified on the Working Genius assessment.
mhm.
Colby, we're in Strategic Coach. So like I could go through so many examples of people who certify, people who franchise, I mean, CrossFit, right? So like
Mhm,
anybody can open a box gym, but when
mhm,
you use the CrossFit name, it
mhm,
comes with certain rights and privileges. And now you're not. See, what's funny, Brendon, is that a lot of times people think IP is for the creator. IP was actually created for the consumer. I
mhm.
know that sounds weird, but when I go to the store and pick up a drug, prescription drug or a over the counter drug, how do I know that
Mhm,
that's actually, you know, Bayer aspirin or whatever,
mhm.
right? Unless there's some IP controls in place,
Right.
anybody could slap on that logo. And that's why pirating of goods is so difficult because they're using the good name, but
Mhm.
oftentimes it's an inferior product. And so
Right.
it's actually to help the consumer out there not be duped into
Sure.
thinking, I'm getting this, but I'm actually paying this.
Yeah. And I think the other way, like just looking at it from a franchise IP perspective, I mean, most, franchises aren't necessarily when they're doing this, I don't know how much they think about this, but for the consumer, to your point, when you're in a different state or a different country where
Yes.
you recognize a franchise and you don't recognize anything else around you, chances are you're going to go to the franchise because you have trust.
Us.
You've seen them before, you have trust, and you're gonna most likely gonna buy from them
Yeah.
versus some brand you've never heard of before.
And the term's even called the brand value. It's
Mhm,
it's amazing, but you're absolutely right. Even down to, I know this sounds crazy, but even down to colors and smells. This is
mhm,
called trade dress in the intellectual property world. So Tiffany's blue is
mhm.
a real thing. And you might be like, how can they trademark a color?
Right.
But think about it. John Deere, for example. Somebody's filming a YouTube video and they're like, this tractor stinks. I can't believe it. It just blew up on me and it wrecked my crops. Okay, guess what? If that's green and yellow, you're going to be thinking that's John Deere, even though it's not. And so
Mhm,
the point is this, like brands that actually protect the color, Play-Doh has protected the smell. Isn't that crazy? So
mhm.
the smell of Play-Doh has been trademarked. And once your eyes are open to IP, like you see it everywhere. I'm
Yeah.
just picking up stuff around me here, but this is athletic greens, okay? And so
Mhm,
like athletic greens, has protected their name and they have all kinds of things here on every bottle.
mhm.
I have prescription here and it's like they're, the generic is waiting. They're waiting in line for that 20-year mark patent to expire so that the morning of they're shipping the
The
new
generic.
the new
Mhm.
generic. And I get it. We can all be mad at like a drug that costs a lot of money and I tend to be mad, but the point is this. If you Google how much money does it take to bring a drug to market,
Uh-huh.
it's astronomical. The amount of hoops and research and scientists and FDA and all this. So the point is this, like if there's no incentive to protect IP, you actually hurt your economy.
Uh,
There's a Venetian act that was created, and they said if we want to attract men, they used the masculine back then, but if they said if we want to attract men of great talent, we need to protect their intellectual property, otherwise they won't want to come to our city. So it's
mhm.
almost like this socialism thing where if you think, well, ideas are just free for everybody and nobody should be compensated and nobody should be rewarded, you actually hurt your society because you
Mhm.
take away the incentive.
Yeah, yeah, and sort of I like that Venetian example because I was already thinking of we were in Italy a few months ago and we visited Modena, which is where
Oh,
Ferrari is, and
wow.
I'm guessing Ferrari red is probably also a protected color, but
Probably.
I'm not totally sure, but
Yeah.
I know Enzo Ferrari probably came 500 or
Oh,
1,000
yeah.
years after the Venetians, but I think he realized when he was onto a good thing in a fast car that was the right color that he wanted to protect the color.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw a special about him. That was fascinating. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I'm looking at this right now. I found it. It's called the Venetian patent statue.
Mm,
Again, because like there's some historians here.
right. Yes.
But yeah, but they basically said that, they wanted to, attract new ingenious efforts. And so, yeah, like that's why they created it. And even in Tony D'Angelo is so smart and the strategic coach. He gets into all the
Mhm.
history. I'm more of a practitioner, but he
Yeah.
gets into history and talks about like how it's even part of the Constitution.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
I had him on the show a few months ago, and I think that is for anyone who also wants to go deeper from that
he's the
perspective.
historian.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tony's
yeah,
a good guy to follow on that one.
absolutely.
So, Kary, we've already touched on this once or twice, but as AI makes it easier to
Mhm.
create and replicate content,
Yeah.
how should founders and leaders in franchise businesses or any other business for that matter rethink intellectual property and competitive advantage?
I would say number one, assume that your audience is recording you and feeding your information into AI. And I'm not even saying maliciously.
Just
I'm just saying
accidentally.
that
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
practically
Yeah.
speaking, and I think you might have heard the story. If not, you can Google it. It's out there. My TEDx took me over 100 hours of memorizing, rehearsing, flying to the location. And, I spoke actually on IP protection and how blockchain and instant IP was a way to do it fast and easy, less than 60 seconds. It creates an immutable timestamp. Nobody can change it, not even you. Can be
Hmm.
used in a court of law to prove first use. Anyway, I'm teaching that on my TEDx. So then I go write this book, and I need to put in there the location of my TEDx. And all of a sudden on Google, some guy's article shows up and I'm like, whoa, hold on, that's interesting. And I started to read and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my exact TEDx talk. And the guy's claiming it as his article.
Hmm.
And the first thing you do in that situation is you screenshot it. Okay. You got
Hmm.
to screenshot it because you don't know how they're going to respond once you can connect with them. They might
So,
deny
so
it.
as it's sitting on your Google browser, you screenshot that whole
Screenshot it.
page.
Screenshot,
Yeah.
man. I screenshotted the whole thing. I'm so glad I did because and then here's what I did. I contacted them, didn't hear anything. So then I said, "You know what? I know I protected this on Instant IP. I know I screenshotted them. I'm gonna write an article on LinkedIn." So I wrote an article on LinkedIn. I said, "Have you ever had your IP stolen? Guess what? Blah, blah, blah." Hours later, the guy shows up on LinkedIn. He
Mhm.
says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." Turns out he was a filmmaker and a celebrity in the country of Georgia, the country. Okay. And he
Mhm.
says, guess what? My team and I started to use AI to write articles. We had no idea that this was your TEDx. And I believed him, you
Mhm.
know, and I believe a lot of people. But here's the point. I'm right now in a lawsuit with Anthropic. I'm one of those 500,000 books that were stolen by Anthropic. And again, like I'm not against AI. I use AI today. I love AI. But here's the
Mhm.
point when 500,000 books are stolen and the authors have spent their life writing these, they get zero compensation. The company's valued at billions and billions of dollars. Why? Because they trained on our data. And now our original work is being served up in prompts that are confusing consumers so that now they think their prompt has produced this amazing new framework. That's theft. And so guess what? Now Anthropic's in the largest copyright lawsuit of all time, $1.5 billion. I'll end up getting $3,000 per book. That's 3,000 times 3. That's $9,000 for some of the books that were stolen. But you know what? It's not going to move the needle for me, but I feel bad for some authors like, who are bootstrapping their business that could really mess them up. So again, not against AI, but it's a tool. And so I would say to your original question, what do founders do? Assume that their IP is going to be stolen and therefore protect it. And so we've given Brendon, everybody a free IP credit. So we say, look, start the process. We want to make it easy. This is what Dan Sullivan teaches. Going off the high dive is a patent. $30,000, 1 to 3 years. It's a big jump. Get in the kiddie pool. The kiddie pool is, here's what I tell people. How do you know if you should protect something on instant IP? If tomorrow you wake up and that idea is stolen and you're locked out of it, would you emotionally care? And if the answer is no, don't protect it. Because again, your second credit's going to cost you $97. If the pain of somebody locking you out of that idea doesn't matter to you, who cares? I take my trash out to the curb every Thursday. Okay. And do I care if anyone steals my trash? No, take it. But some of these ideas that I have, I don't want people to take. And it's not even just share, but it's lock you out of it, Brendon. Lock you out of it, because that's where you really get into trouble. It's your genius.
That's a good way to frame it. I mean, if you do care about it one way or another, then protect it.
Yeah.
I've used instant IP to do the same thing.
I used it yesterday. I went out on a big post this morning. I knew I had something hot. And so we have this flywheel where we basically say, I'm going to show this to you really quick. If are they just watching or are they listening to both?
No, they're watching too.
Yeah. So I'm showing a little flywheel here that basically says, hey, look, when you publish could mean a course, a program, a business. It doesn't just mean books, but before you publish, protect. Because if you just go right to promote and profit, you leave yourself vulnerable. And Dan Sullivan, our coach, says that the number one thing to protect is your confidence. And so by doing this flywheel, you're really gaining clarity, confidence, credibility, and then cap.
I like that.
And then notice this, Brendon, too. We put the superscript IP there. Why do we do that? Because we file this in 38 countries around the world. Literally, people think that when they use a TM, and this is a big thing for your show, don't ever use a TM. There's one reason you should ever use a TM. A TM is an unregistered trademark. So here's what it is, Brendon. When somebody uses a TM, they're telling their competitors, I think this is valuable, but I haven't done anything to protect it. Almost like you're telling people, hey, there's gold in the house, but the front door's open, go ahead. The other problem with a TM is if you haven't looked at the USPTO and you slap a TM on something that you think is original and it's actually not, you now are infringing. So instead, use a superscript IP, which says to the world, this is protected by blockchain technology. I've actually taken a step to protect it. So that's actually what we filed. It's called a certification mark. It's a classification of IP. It's like the Idaho potatoes. Nobody can stamp an Idaho potatoes on unless the Idaho potato certifier. Nobody can slap an IP on unless they have gone through instant IP.
Yeah. So for those who are listening and not watching this episode, so the superscript IP, so most people are familiar with the superscript R or the superscript TM, which you were saying we shouldn't use. And if anything, it's an invitation to go and steal something.
Right.
But so if there's a superscript IP next to a name of any kind, that's what you're talking about. And that means it's protected by instant IP in this case, blockchain.
Yep. Exactly. The R is great. And by the way, I got an R around instant IP. I got an R around igniting souls. I save the R for something that's really important because again, it's like, do you just put a deadbolt on your house or do you put a deadbolt and a ring camera? And a guard dog and a fence. Like if something's very valuable, this is called IP stacking. So let's talk about
Okay.
Apple for a second. Apple not only trademarked the logo, they
Uh-huh.
patented a lot of the iPhone technology, multiple patents, and then they
Yeah.
put a copyright on the user manual. So again,
Uh-huh.
Apple's an example of one of the most valuable brands on the planet that used IP stacking and IP marking to discourage theft. And here's what you want to do, Brendon. You want to develop a reputation. This is a pretty cool story here. You want to develop a reputation that you take your IP seriously. We've actually seen back of the room sales increase many times when somebody starts their talk. Imagine if I had a talk and I said, our next speaker at this conference is Brendon. Brendon, listen, he's going to come and share his very best to us. Just know that everything he is going to share has been protected with blockchain technology through instant IP. And then we put a little thing on the screen that shows a lock.
Uh-huh.
Then when you step up on the stage, you tell me, what do you think the audience is going to do when you start your talk, knowing that I just introduced you? What do you think the audience feels and does?
Yeah, no, there's definitely they know there's going to be value in
They
whatever they
do.
hear next.
They
Yeah.
suddenly put down they grab their pen and they say, "Oh my gosh," and they lean in and they take it seriously, and then you won't see people going click, 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 and what it
Uh-huh.
does then at the back of the room when you say, "Hey, I hope you found this valuable, and if you'd like to work with us, scan the QR code and we'll set up a clarity call." Boom,
Uh-huh.
everyone's scanning it. Why? Because you just told everyone in the audience, you modeled the way that you take your stuff seriously. The
Uh-huh.
alternative is, hey, if you like today, I'll just shoot you my slide deck. Okay. That's like saying, it's a horrible analogy, but it's basic. It's a very bad analogy, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's almost like a male or female prostitute just saying, whoever wants me, just come on over, whatever, like
Uh-huh.
you don't value someone who doesn't value themselves, and
Uh-huh.
you need to value your company and your IP because it is valuable. I mean, that we sit in strategic coach and they talk about valuations of IP and
Uh-huh.
how your company is in your franchise. You talked about it's a
Uh-huh.
higher value when you've identified the IP.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we've also I would say, probably in the last year or more so, since I've become, more sort of, again, my eyes and ears
You
are
see
sort
it
of now
everywhere. Yeah.
are open to the value of IP. You hear about, we again, because we hang out with a lot of entrepreneurs, and you hear about entrepreneurs who've recently sold their businesses, and they're in the room when we start talking about the value of the IP that they didn't actually
Uh,
have valued as in the sale, which is often, I would say, I mean, the sort of the number I'm using right now is say 20%. So a $50 million business, they could have actually sold for $60 million business and still potentially had royalties on the back end because they just weren't thinking about it.
that's right. I mean,
Um,
and even Michael Jackson, like you start going into all these different Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant is still, I'm not a basketball guy, but like his merchandise is still being sold. Michael Jackson songs are still making money. Like you got to realize like your IP will actually outlive you.
yeah,
I got C.S. Lewis's book right here on my, you know, the dude's been dead for 60, 70, 80 years, whatever. I don't know. But the
yeah.
point is this like intangible. This is an intangible asset that keeps paying your descendants, royalties.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just, I'm based in Minneapolis, and, Prince, of course, was one of the great sons of this city. And when you fly in and out of MSP Airport, there's actually a Prince store,
Are you
where you
serious?
can where you can buy all, Prince's paraphernalia, and of course, it's all protected by IP, and it will continue to generate, value and wealth to the sort of descendants and whoever
Oh,
benefits
yeah.
from his estate.
You gotta fact
Yeah.
check me on this, but I really believe I'm gonna look this up after our chat. I believe that he had to rename himself the artist formerly known as Prince because of IP.
Mhm.
Like, in other words, he couldn't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Taylor
Yeah.
Swift, what did she do? She re-recorded Taylor's version of the music because she had sold the rights. And so it's funny. People don't think IP is that cool until you start seeing it's everywhere. And once your eyes are open, you're like, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I was thinking, like, if people don't take anything away from this conversation other than what you talked about and the value of
Yeah.
the S&P 500,
Yeah.
where, 40 or 50 years ago, let's say less than 20% of the total value of those S&P 500 companies was in their IP. Today,
Oh, yeah.
it's 90% of those companies. It's their IP that creates that
Yeah.
value. That should be enough to sort of get someone thinking.
And sometimes people think, and I know we got to land the plane here soon, but I
Yeah.
do teach in the university. And it's funny, once they start talking about IP and entrepreneurship, Gen Z, I'm going to make a statement. Most Gen Zers think, oh, IP, that's for old people. Yeah, whatever. And I look out in the audience, I say, okay, let's just take your Owala drink, container. Okay,
Uh-huh.
let's look at your Adidas shoes. Okay, hold on. What about your Apple Watch? And we start unpacking, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm wearing IP everywhere." So, and that's just not even on their phone, which has all kinds of apps and Mr. Beast they've subscribed to. And
Uh-huh.
again, like you don't see IP till you see it, and then once you see it, you realize it's everywhere. And so, I would encourage people, yeah, read the book, get
Uh-huh.
a free credit, Instant IP. And then we got these amazing tools on the website, instantip.today, where you can find your IP, you can name your IP, you can price your IP, and they're all free, no email opt-in, and it's really cool.
Yeah. No, thanks for doing that, Gary. So as you said, we're going to sort of start landing the plane here. Fortunately, not
Yeah.
right away, but so scaling companies need structure, but
Mm,
too much structure slows innovation.
yeah.
How have you sort of balanced or helped others balance operational consistency with flexibility as the business grows?
That's so good. So I'm a visual guy, man. I'm gonna show you this slide here, and then we'll explain it to them if they can't see it. So this
Yeah.
is You Are an IP Company 12 Steps. Okay. And again,
Uh-huh.
I co-authored with Katie Rubino on purpose. She's the one with the law degree. So
Uh-huh.
everything that's in this book has been pushed through a grid and a filter that says, will this hold up, in court? So
Uh-huh.
basically, you are an IP company. You nailed it. The first step is visualize. You first have to think, wait, hold on, I am an IP company. Wait, I have IP. Second step is organize, because
Uh-huh.
most of your Rembrandts are in your attic and you can't even find them. You don't even know
Uh-huh.
they're under this corner, they're there. So we
Uh-huh.
really help you understanding, like, take inventory of your past, present, and future IP and
Uh-huh.
then systematize. So I have a system, like I just said. I wrote a blog post, I wrote an e-newsletter, I posted something, but before I did, guess what? I protected it last night on Instant IP. I went
Uh-huh.
publish, protect, then I promoted it, and already today we've gained even some sales from it. I
Wow.
don't, I don't just go publish, promote. That's the
Uh-huh.
big mistake.
Uh-huh.
And then I normalize. You got to teach your team. And so some of the companies we work with, they've actually created the IP awards. So now
Uh-huh.
instead of employees hiding IP and saying, wait, I'm going to take this when I leave. Oh, wait, I'm not going to tell my boss. No, now they're saying, look, we're going to reward you once a year. And whoever's got the best IP, we're going to have the IP awards. And so
Uh-huh.
you even might give them a little bump, $50 or $25 or whatever, every
Uh-huh.
time they're doing something unique. Okay,
Uh-huh.
that's normalizing it,
Uh-huh.
specializing it. How do you want to be? You can't be everything in the world. Mr. Beast isn't everything. Taylor Swift isn't everything. So specialize how you're going to be. And then our friend Chad Jenkins named the baby, but you're really verbalizing it. You can't pick the same name. Just Do It's taken. You can't have Just Do It. You'll have a lawsuit.
Uh-huh.
So now you have to verbalize it's something unique. Digitizes how that instant IP is a great first start. We're not saying never patent, never trademark, never copyright. It's like saying a hammer can do everything. A hammer can do certain things, a saw can do certain things, a screwdriver can do certain things. Instant
Uh-huh.
IP is a tool, and in its right tool, it's a ton of sense, but so is a patent. And again, if
Uh-huh.
people want to work with me one-on-one or whatever, I can help them understand. But then we get into monetize something that excites you.
Uh-huh.
We talked about franchising as an example. Maximize, you start getting on your radar our competitors. Does Arby's and Wendy's and Burger King know McDonald's? Absolutely. They know what makes them unique. Oh, they have a fish sandwich. We better have one. Or you know what? We better create a McRib because it's different. Like they all are watching each other's IP, not
Uh-huh.
copying, but creating differentiation. And then
Uh-huh.
you get in evangelizing, which is the marketing. Globalizing is like how to go big. And like I said, we filed the superscript in 38 countries because we want to know that
Uh-huh.
nobody can use that in another country. And then optimize, of course, freedom finances and fulfillment. So that's really you are an IP company in 12 steps. And again, the book takes a case study for
Hmm.
each different company, Magnolia, Disney, CrossFit, and takes a deep dive.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's going to be really good to dig into further. So Kary, so here now as we do land the plane, one last question. So looking ahead, how do you see AI reshaping ownership, creativity, and the future value of IP, of intellectual property?
So this is what gets into the mission of why I'm so passionate about instant IP. I believe we're at a tipping point as a species. And I know this gets a little bit epic, but so be it. I've seen a shift that people say, well, why create? If AI is going to steal it anyway, why create? Or you know what? I can never compete with AI. AI is way too creative. I'm just going to settle for being a consumer. When we shift as a society from creators to consumers for multiple reasons, I think we lose as a species. And so my desire for instant IP to grow is to give creators the incentive and the confidence to keep on creating. And
Yeah.
it's also to say, you know what I feed into AI, I don't have to worry that it's going to steal and serve it up as another output to somebody else. Because even if it does, I have an immutable timestamp where now I can fight, just like I'm in a lawsuit right now with Anthropic, you know? Like they're being held accountable. Meta's being held accountable. So Suno's being held accountable. Like we need to hold these accountable. Otherwise, think about it. The elitists, and again, like I believe in capitalism. I'm an entrepreneur, but if everyone can just scrape everyone's stuff, claim it as their own, make billions, and then the creators suffer, you're really going to hurt your society. People are going to say, you know, I'm not going to create life-saving drugs anymore, life-saving technologies. Why? And
Mhm.
so I feel like we need to reestablish that IP protection. And so that's really, I love AI. I'm not against it, but it needs to provide attribution.
Yeah, yeah, and I think so. So it sounds like there the differentiation is creativity, and without creativity,
Yeah,
who do we become?
just
Right?
consumers. Yeah,
Yeah,
we become like some of those movies where we're just literally plugged into the matrix and entertained to death. No, we're supposed to be on I love the Theodore Roosevelt. I just watched a documentary on him, but the man in the arena, the woman in the arena who says, you know what? I might taste defeat, but at least I'm in the game. That's where life is, not just sitting on the bench consuming.
right. And I suppose extending the sort of the matrix analogy there, you want to make sure that we continue to have a choice between the blue pill and the red pill,
That's
right?
right,
And not
man.
and not just be told, well, here you go. Here's your pill.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a faith guy and I believe God created us with a unique purpose and we are co-created in God's image. And so when we lose our creativity, I think as a species, we are choosing our own downfall if that's what we settle for.
Right. Yeah. And I think, maybe the sort of the next step is, create and then of course take action to protect what you've created.
Absolutely.
So that because without that, it's not going to become real because any creation that's not actually put into the world doesn't actually do anything.
That's right.
And in order to do that, it makes sense to protect it as one of the first action steps. Yeah.
You've nailed it. I mean, It's 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 exciting, it's simple. We don't need to overcomplicate it. Once people start throwing around all kinds of legalese, my heart sinks a little bit because I mean, I have instant IP on my phone. I have ideas come to me when I'm on the fly. I can speak it, I can text it, I can take a picture, and that IP is protected, and then I go keep moving and creating.
Yeah. Kary, that was awesome. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.